If you have a bachelor's degree and live anywhere in the United States, there's now a way for you to take your bourbon education to the next level. The Distilled Spirits Business Certificate from the University of Louisville is a 6-course online program that will prepare you for the business side of the spirits industry. Offered by the AACSB Accredited College of Business, this certificate is taught by business professors and industry leaders from Brown-Forman, Beam Suntory, Jack Daniels, and more. Join this one-of-a-kind experience and prepare for your next adventure. Get enrolled into this online program at uofl.me/bourbon pursuit. Literally, guys rolling the barrels over and hand putting them over top of the fires, and then kind of like stepping back for a few seconds, letting it do its thing.
It's a tough job in the summer.
You're like, jump in there and just get a smell. And I'm like, whoa. There's like 10 huge fires. I'm scared shitless.
Yeah. I feel like keeping my arm here today.
Yeah.
This is episode 240 of Bourbon Pursuit. I'm one of your hosts, Kenny, and I've got this week's Bourbon News Roundup for you. Woodford Reserve is releasing its annual limited edition high proof expression, Woodford Reserve Batch Proof. This year, it's bottled at 123.6 proof, and this expression is part of the annual Masters Collection series. Woodford Reserve's proprietary batching process for this release is done by blending barrels into a batch and bottling the whiskey at its actual proof straight from the barrel. The batch proof is crafted using the same grain bill and process as Woodford Reserve, and this limited edition collection is available in select US and global markets with a suggested retail price of $129.99. There's a bill working its way through Olympia that would address what seems like a monopoly on selling liquor in Washington state, and it's House Bill 2204. In 2011, the state liquor stores in Washington state let private businesses sell alcohol. It came out of Initiative 1183, but some big corporations like Costco and some grocery chain stores seemed to get the bigger benefit out of the initiative because in order to sell spirits, you needed to have a location with over 10,000 square feet. A new bill would actually let smaller businesses sell spirits, and last week, that bill passed out of the House, Commerce, and Gaming Committee on a 10-1 vote. So soon, you can get your bread, milk, beer, and bourbon at a convenience store across Washington state. An Australian couple stuck on a quarantine cruise ship with cases of coronavirus on board have managed to get their wine delivered by drone. Posted on Facebook by Jan and Dave Binskin on February 7th, the couple provided an insight into the life on a quarantined Diamond Princess cruise ship off the coast of Japan, and more specifically, getting wine onto the ship. The Naked Wine Club received a request from the couple who wanted to know if they could get their wine delivery while stuck on a ship, and to everyone's surprise, they accepted. The couple post stated that 2 cases of wine were delivered by drone to the ship and said that the Japanese Coast Guard had no idea what was going on. I don't know about you, but having bourbon delivered by drone is something that I can start getting behind. A Tokyo restaurant chain has opened up a small pub in one of the city's busiest train stations, but it has a robot bartender serving drinks to commuters on their way home from work. Called Zoroken Robo Tavern, the bar is located in Tokyo's Ikebukuro train station and is owned by Euro Notaki, a company that operates a chain of casual restaurants for after-work drinking around the country. This pilot program will run for about 2 months. But here's the kicker. Consumers will first pay for their drinks at an automated payment kiosk and receive a QR code of the receipt. You scan that receipt at the robot, and it takes about 40 seconds to pour a glass of draft beer or a little under a minute to deliver a cocktail. But also, the robot has a set of cameras built into its screen to monitor the emotional state of customers, tracking whether they're happy or if they're growing impatient. So look out, bartenders, the robots are coming. Vending machines that dispense spirits are becoming more common around the country, but mostly in establishments such as restaurants or bars that already sell alcohol. Anheuser-Busch and InBev recently introduced Beer Box for use at concerts, sports arenas, and music festivals. And back on January 31st, the First District Court of Appeal in Florida overturned the state's 2017 denial of a residential condominium to sell beer and wine in vending machines. This was originally met with criticism from several trade groups, including the Beer Industry of Florida Florida Beer Wholesalers Association, and the Florida Independent Spirits Association. But the court struck down the division's order, and that nothing in plain language of Florida law prohibits the sale of alcoholic beverages through automated dispensing machines. So who knows? I can get your bourbon soon through vending machines. Now today on the podcast, we talked to Paul McLaughlin. He might not be known to you yet or his cooperage, but the story he shares and how they hone their craft is like no other. We had the opportunity to tour Kelvin Cooperage and get a behind-the-scenes tour of their barrel building process. It's amazing how everything is still very labor-intensive, and he's using machines and tooling that have been a part of their process since the early 1900s. We discuss how he got into the family business of running cooperage from Scotland to Kentucky, and how he dives into their process of toasting on natural fires and really what makes their product different than any other cooperages around the country. Then we dive into some of the fun part about the economics of the cooperage and what they're doing to satisfy the growth of worldwide demand for used barrels. Now, make sure you're also following us on social media, and you can see some of the pictures and videos from our visit to Kelvin Cooperage. And if you aren't a supporter of the podcast on Patreon, I encourage you, please go and check it out. In the past 2 weeks, we've released 2 Elijah Craig barrels, a 1792 foolproof, and a Willet 7-year rye that we all selected with our Patreon community. These are now all sold out, but you don't want to miss your chance to get your hands on the next one. So view all that we have to offer of being a part of this community at patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts right now, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you're probably missing out on all of our bonus content. Every Tuesday, we release a 2-minute podcast called Whiskey Quickie. And if you aren't subscribed, you won't see the bonus content that we post. But hey, if you're listening on Spotify or iHeartRadio, you're all good, and thanks for being a listener. All right, let's get on with the show. Here's Joe from Barrel Bourbon, and then you've got Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
It's Joe from Barrel Bourbon. Our bourbons have won a few medals at some of the most prestigious spirits competitions out there. But don't take their word for it, find out for yourself. Use the store locator at barrelbourbon.com.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. Listen, it happens. Sometimes we buy a bottle of bourbon, we get home, we taste it, and it tastes like musty corn or stale potato chips or drywall or some type of plastic or chemical, and we just completely dismiss that brand, whether it's new or something we've been tasting for a long time. We taste it, and in that moment, we're like, yuck, I don't want it. Now, I've been doing this long enough to know that there's a lot of pieces that go into making American whiskey. From the time that the whiskey goes into the barrel to the time it gets into your bottle, there's probably hundreds of factors that could influence the flavor. Things that you don't even think about. Like, for example, there was a distillery that recently found hunks of corn in their pipe system. So as they were pumping it into the still, they found little hunks of corn that were getting stuck at kind of like a collar part. And what would happen is that corn got moldy and it started spewing out all kinds of unwanted bacterial flavors and notes. And it took them a few bad batches, before they figured out the cause of it. In fact, when you go to a distillery and they're on shutdown, you can't take a tour, chances are they found something like that. They find it quite frequently. Very recently, I was at a distillery. I'm not going to name who it was because it's a new distillery. And right before their bottling line, I learned that they had this PVC pipe before the whiskey got to the bottle. When I was tasting it out of the barrel, I was like, my goodness, this is fantastic whiskey, especially for a young distillery. And then when I tasted it out of the bottle in their tasting room, it was absolutely different whiskey. I tasted this really rough, edgy plastic note. And I told the distiller this, and he said, well, it could be this PVC pipe that we have here. And I was like, I'm not telling you that it's that or it's not that. All I can tell you is that I taste plastic. And he changed it. Now, look, I hope that changes the flavor there, and it was indeed the plastic that was causing that, and that distiller is no longer going to have to worry about it. But the reason why I point this out to you is we tend to be very critical and very judgmental about the whiskeys we drink, and we tend to stay focused on things like warehouses, mash bills, yeast. But the fact is, there's a whole lot that goes into making whiskey. And those mechanics, those repairmen, all the people who touch every single inch of that distillery, they all make an impact on the flavor that you taste. And that's this week's Above the Char. Hey, if you have an idea for Above the Char, hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or my website, fredminnick.com. Until next week, cheers.
Welcome back to the episode of Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of Bourbon. Kenny and Ryan here on the Shively side of town, the lively Shively, but
I don't know if it's a Shively.
We're outer
This is Okolona.
But I mean, this is a part of town, and not only that, I was just talking about Louisville, but really the topic of today is talking about one of the biggest factors that goes into contributing to the flavor of the whiskey, flavor of bourbon, and that is the barrel in itself.
Yep. Distillers take all the credit, but it's the wood.
It's the magic that happens inside of that.
And we were just walking around the plant, and it's always humbling and awesome experience to see. Just you kind of forget how much labor is involved in from barrel to bottle, and you just get an appreciation of so now every time I want to say a bottle sucks, I'm not going to say it because I just saw a bunch of guys sweating, working their asses off. And it's really cool to see that,
It
whiskey
really
is one of those things that there's just so many hands involved in it.
Yeah. And we're going to talk more about some of the process and what we just saw. We just took a tour of the facility to kind of get some context of the situation. And yeah, I mean, it's don't get me wrong, there's a lot of machinery involved, but it's not as heavy as automation as a bottling line.
Nope.
It's a very hard, laborious process. There's a lot of quality control and quality checking that goes into it. And not only that is, we'll talk about the fire, and it's very unique compared to a lot of people within inside of the industry here of how they toast and how they char barrels and how it is going to derive a distinct profile at the end of the day for it too.
Yeah, and I know why our guest wears black shoes. Walking around, Kenny had some white Chuck Taylors on. It's ooh, those are going to get...
Rookie move.
Yeah, exactly.
So we just had our guest chime in there. So let's go ahead and introduce him. So today we have on the show, we have Paul McLaughlin. Paul is the co-owner of Kelvin Cooperage. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we kind of get in talking about the business and talking about barrels and stuff like that, let's talk about you. Did you ever growing up? I mean, so by the way, if people didn't catch on, you have an accent, right? So
slightly,
yeah.
Yes.
So you're not from the South, really deep South Alabama or something.
I'm not from Shively, no. Yeah, no. So I grew up in Scotland, and my family there had a small cooperage, mainly repairing barrels for the Scotch whiskey industry. So it was a pretty small operation. So I've been around barrels all my life and swore I would never work for the family business. So
was the name Kelvin?
It was Kelvin Cooperage, yeah. So my dad started Kelvin Cooperage when he was young, served his apprenticeship when he was 15, and then started the cooperage when he was about 21, 22. So, I had a good run with that. And then in the early 90s, we realized that it made sense to repair the barrels in the US before we shipped them to Scotland. Mm-hmm. It was a very simple idea, but it was quite revolutionary at the time. So
was this because a lot of stuff just ended up being too damaged by the time it
got
over
you're shipping bad wood. Freight's expensive, so why not maximize your freight costs by shipping only barrels that are ready to fill without needing to be worked on? So that was kind of the genesis of our move to Kentucky. So we came here, or my brother came here, Kevin, who's the co-owner with me, came here in the early 90s and started out repairing used bourbon barrels and sending them back over to our customers in Scotland. That was right around the time that American oak was being kind of rediscovered for wine barrels. So we started making wine barrels, and that was where we learned how to toast and treat wood the right way, slow toasting and everything. And then, of course, craft bourbon came along, and we jumped in with 2 feet into that.
So why did you say you would never jump back into it, and then why did you jump back in? Why would you do anything with whiskey barrels?
Working with my family, I know that's a tough dynamic a lot of times, and it's proven to be at times. So I wanted to avoid that. Unfortunately, the way I avoided it was by becoming a lawyer. And, and after a few years as a lawyer, I would have done anything, including working with the family. So 20 or so years later, here I am still.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's also talk about. So your family was already doing this for the Scotch whiskey industry.
Correct.
I'm assuming that, you know, in growing up over in Scotland, and people probably say the same thing about us being in Kentucky. I mean, I guess whiskey was probably pretty common in the household then.
Oh yeah. Always a blended Scotch.
Mm-hmm.
That was just the standard, like bourbon is here.
Yeah.
You know, that was all people drank. Although growing up, it was more of an old man's drink.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's certainly not where I started out.
Yeah. Where'd you start out at then?
Oh, you know, pint of lager.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still like a pint of lager. So. Yeah.
Was there a turning point for you when you said like, oh, I could probably get on this whole whiskey train too?
When I moved here,
Yeah.
I found bourbon much more approachable than Scotch whiskey. You know, to start learning about whiskey, much more drinkable.
And what was the thought process in your head to that? Because I mean, we've had Scotch before, and you've got such variations of single malts, and you've got peats and
non-peat,
and then like you got the corn side of it that brings this sweet flavor. So what was your kind of?
It was just trying bourbon when I moved here. I'd never really drank it before, and everyone was drinking it. So I thought, well, give it a shot.
Yeah,
everybody's beat them and join them. Yeah, so
might as well act like a local.
And it was good. You know, that was the light bulb. It's like, wow, this stuff is good. It's got some complexity. It's a bit more interesting than just a beer or a wine. You know, so it's a nice change of pace.
What were your first thoughts when you came to Kentucky, and like how did it compare to Scotland, like in regards like
well, I moved here from Southern California, so that was a culture shock.
Oh, wow.
You know, I was living on the beach in Southern California working as a lawyer, so coming into this environment here,
this isn't necessarily like San Diego. Yeah.
No, it was a big change.
Yeah.
But you know, I'd been and visited, so I knew I liked Louisville, and I liked the kind of the countryside. You know, the rolling hills around here remind a lot of people of Scotland, and I felt the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and there's, you know, friendly people, terrible climate, but
always the worst.
Yeah.
It's like,
but you know,
it is good for aging whiskey though, because that's the only thing,
and for seasoning wood, so it works out well. But no, we've loved it since we've been here. You know, my kids have been born and raised here, so we're all in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So kind of talk about the genesis of this cooperage as well, because your brother came here, kind of started it, and then when did you say like, okay, what was the turning point when you said I'm ready to start joining the family business? What year was that?
I came in 2001.
Okay.
2000. So I'd been practicing law for 4.5 years at that point for a big international law firm doing kind of soul-crushing business litigation. Mm-hmm. Mainly petty discovery disputes. So looked at the young partners, which was what we were all aspiring to as beginning lawyers, and they were all pretty miserable. So I thought, why am I?
You work yourself to death.
Why am I aiming for that? So my wife was working at the same law firm as me, and we both just said we need to get out. Mm-hmm. So family business.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Ready or not?
Yeah.
I'm back. Yeah, I was going to say, so you started here. Now, was it hard? Was your brother your boss at first, or did you kind of like how?
Yeah, that's all part of that family dynamic.
Yeah.
That I was a bit hesitant about.
Is he older or younger?
He's 7 years older.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
it'd be awkward if he's younger.
Yeah, it would be really awkward. And he also served his apprenticeship in Scotland, so he's a fully qualified cooper, which I'm not, and which he reminds me of regularly. So, yeah, there's some fun dynamics going on.
Yeah, so talk about the different dynamics. Like you said, your brother's the cooperage. What do you bring kind of to this business that maybe
still trying to figure that out?
Still trying to find your home.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, we have a great time running it together. It's a very relationship-driven business. You know, you'll have seen that with the people you've talked to. You know, we're all kind of collegial. We've got very long-term customers, so we have a great time. And it's an interesting bunch, especially this new kind of craft whiskey. It's brought in a bunch of very interesting, entrepreneurial, different people, all of whom have a really great story, and you know, great fun to work with.
Were those relationships set before you came on board, or were you having to go out and like knock down doors, be like,
yeah,
you want your barrels or buy ours?
Yeah, and that's what we tell some of the younger people here is it hasn't always been this way. Whiskey wasn't always booming. So yeah, we had times where, we couldn't sell barrels and we had to find new homes for them. We were knocking barrels down and shipping them to China for flooring. They were selling them for less than $10 a barrel, a used barrel, which people can't imagine now. They're in such high demand. We definitely go through cycles.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one's just been a really good one for a really long time.
For a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody has podcasts on cooperages when things are in a downturn.
I went the first probably 18 years here without doing any interviews at all. Mm-hmm. No one knew we were here. No one cared. And, now we've had, podcasts, video productions, radio shows,
You just leave me alone. Let me do my work.
Yeah, we are now. It was a novelty for a while and then we're like, nope, done.
Yeah. Very cool.
And so kind of talk a little bit about, the process here and how it's a little bit different from some of the other ones. We've had Brown-Forman, we've had Independent Stave on the show, and so kind of talk about like where the process, what you do, how it's a little bit different, how it's unique to kind of anybody else. And not only that is you're doing both ends of the spectrum. You're also creating barrels. You're also brokering and doing a lot of sales too.
Yeah. So on our new barrel production, the big difference between us and some of the ones you mentioned is scale. We're tiny compared to Independent Stave and Brown-Forman. So we're not nearly as mechanized. So it is a lot more physically labor intensive, a lot more hands touch the barrels. So we are, on a really good day, we might be able to do 500 barrels, new barrels, which sounds like a lot. But, if you think of other cooperages doing 2,500 to 3,000 a day, gives you an idea of the scale.
That, and Heaven Hill fills 1,300 barrels a day.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So we can't keep up with someone like that. So the barrels we're making, we're doing them a lot more physically intensive. Our toasting and charring is all done over natural fires. Using that wine lesson we learned about how to treat the wood with long, slow toast. Only once it has a toast layer in there do we allow the barrel to actually ignite and char. And we really believe strongly in that toasting process. It adds maybe 20 minutes to the time the barrel's on the fire. So that is a huge constraint on our production, but we're not willing to give that up. Mm-hmm. We could double our production tomorrow by cutting that out and doing a 2-minute gas fire burn, but we're not going to do that. There's no gas anywhere near these barrels.
Yeah, kind of talk about your reasoning behind the toasting as well, because I know that Brown-Forman's typically always known for toasting their barrels too. Independent Stave not as much. So kind of talk about your idea of why toast.
So the idea for me, and it again comes from wine barrels, is your toast layer is an additive layer. Char is an extractive layer. It's like a carbon filter. So it's going to extract some of the undesirable young flavors that you get from the new make spirit. Whereas the toast layer is going to be additive. It's going to add those nice, sweet American oak notes that we've all kind of grown to love. That kind of, I always describe it as marzipan. There's kind of a nutty, almondy.
Our listeners are very familiar with marzipan.
Fred Minnick will love you.
Okay, yeah.
He loves marzipan.
But that's what we're going for. And it gives it that kind of, that middle palate that you're looking for, fills it out in the mouth. And you know it when you smell it. We smelled that toasted barrel back there, and I think you all got it immediately. A lot of people describe it as campfire toasted marshmallows. I definitely get more of the marzipan note, but that's what we're looking for. Once we have that, then we do the char. Char is important. They're going to interplay. The char, in addition to doing all the extractive work, obviously gives the color as well. So we want that interplay. And as the spirit expands in the hot months and goes into the wood, and then contracts in the winter, it's going in and out of all those nooks and crannies we create with the alligator char, and it goes all the way into that toast layer and then back out again. So it's the interplay, toast and char is exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Has that always been the process in your family's, I guess, making of barrels, or is it something?
When we were doing wine barrels, it was all about a slow toast.
Okay.
And that's what we learned, and we'd play around with that on ways to slow it down and, do different things, extend the toast out, get deeper penetration. And we're applying that now to whiskey barrels.
The natural fire is an interesting aspect to this.
I know, I've never seen a natural fire. And that's cool.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's something that it's something that it almost, the equipment was something that is very reminiscent of a campfire. I mean, like these little metal kind of like tube things that you put in, kind of harness everything in there, and you kind of control it.
I wanted to bring a Boston Bud in here or something. Be like the perfect
hover it over top for a few hours.
Yeah.
And so kind of talk about what the differences in going with a natural fire versus somebody, and that's mostly what the big guys do, is they have an automated system. The barrel's set up. You count down, and it's like 3, 2, 1, and then you see this massive like flame come up, and then it's there for 8 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever it is, and it's done. Yeah. So kind of talk about flavor characteristics or imparting of that, like during the char process, because we sat there as the toasting was happening, and then you also said, oh, watch this guy, he's going to speed it up.
Right.
So kind of talk about like what that is like when the charring happens.
Yeah. So the natural fires, we think are important for a few reasons. Not the least of which is its sustainability. We're using our own offcuts, so we're not wasting that wood. When we shape a head, we generate little offcuts of white oak. That's what we burn. So we like that standpoint too. It's a bit more sustainable. But we do think it adds really desirable flavors, like we discussed.
It's kind of like grilling a steak on a gas grill or a charcoal.
And
I prefer the charcoal.
So everyone has their own preference. In terms of what we do, though, you'll notice there was no timing and no temperature controls back there.
There's nothing.
Yeah, a lot of other people are trying to remove the human element from this, kind of make it idiot-proof or something. We want a human element. We want our guys to be looking and smelling, especially. We want them to know when they've hit that sweet marzipan note, and then they let it ignite. So we've kind of made a conscious decision to not have any timing or temperature controls there. We want the human element because these guys have been doing it for years.
Yeah, as they say, it was a very unique process, and actually watching it happen, because typically this is all something that is on some sort of automated belt system, but no, I mean, it's literally guys rolling the barrels over and hand putting them over top of the fires, and then kind of like stepping back for a few seconds, letting it do its thing.
It's a tough job in the summer.
You're like, jump in there and just get a smell, and I'm like, whoa, there's like 10 huge fires. I'm scared shitless.
I feel like keeping my arm here today.
Yeah. That's a tough one. Yeah. It's good in the winter, tough in the summer.
So how long, like you said, these guys know what they're doing. Like how long do you think it takes a new guy to kind of get the feel for it? Or
one of the guys on the fires today is relatively new. It's maybe his second week on the fires.
Okay.
And you can tell he's jumping around a bit compared to the other guys that have been doing it longer. So a couple of months.
Gotcha.
If he can last the summer, he'll be all right.
And so I guess that kind of goes into like an employee rotation. Is somebody coming in? It's like, I don't want to say it's like a Ford factory line, but it actually is a factory line.
Right.
And do they have one responsibility and like that's all they do for their time here? Or is it kind of like, okay, like we're going to rotate you around so everybody kind of has an understanding?
We don't rotate a ton, but everyone can do everything. So if there are backups, everyone can filter back and clear the backup. So we have a couple of floaters, but most everyone has an assigned position.
Yeah. And I guess because it's so labor intensive and like you want to keep that human element, I do Paul's yard, and we don't know, labor's hard to come by these days. And so,
and I cut my own lawn, for example. I can't find anyone to do it.
Exactly. And so talk about the labor, because manual labor is not like the most appealing thing these days, is it?
Yeah, no, most of our guys are 15 plus years with us.
Okay.
So we have very, very low turnover, and that's key for what we do. Some of them are 20 plus years. So that's been really a great boon for us, having that stable workforce.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I also kind of want to talk about back to the business a little bit in regards to scale. We've been talking about like the newly built barrels. I want to talk about a little bit of the sourcing aspect, kind of like what is the magnitude of barrels that you have coming in per day that you're buying on the market from distilleries that you have relationships with,
Right.
and then sort of where does the journey go from there?
Yeah, so used barrels are coming in from everyone, all the major distilleries and a lot of craft distilleries too. We do about 400,000 a year. So they're coming in constantly. It's a constant flow that we need. Most of those are going to Scotland and Ireland, the used barrels, but a lot of them are going different places too, and anywhere they're making spirits. So a lot are going to Asia, a lot to Australia, especially down to Tasmania, which has got kind of a burgeoning craft whiskey market.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's your next trip maybe, Tasmania.
What is their whiskey called?
Just whiskey.
Just whiskey.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
know, like,
yeah.
Scotch, bourbon.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't know
no,
if there's like
that's whiskey.
Tanza or something.
We'll put it on the Bourbon Pursuit credit card.
Yeah.
If we need airline miles.
Exactly.
So they're going out on 40-foot shipping containers, 210 barrels to a container. They fit perfectly as if it was made to hold barrels. And they're going all over the place, ready to fill. So they open container doors, roll the barrels off, fill them right away. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And, people love a used bourbon barrel. They know it's only been used once. They know it's American oak. They know it's got that nice, sweet bourbon flavor in it. So it's a key taste component of Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey now, because they've been doing it for years.
And so when when you're buying these barrels from somebody, I think we had talked about it earlier, is there a sweet spot of what you want to be able to purchase?
We just need them fresh. There'll be a mix of different age barrels in there, different locations, but we just need fresh.
Doesn't matter if it's a 4-year-old barrel or a 20-year-old.
No.
Okay.
No, not really. The only people that really question that are beer guys that are looking for something special.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
A lot of times we can't tell what's been in the barrel. If it comes
Right.
from a big distillery, we don't know what run that was or what label it was.
Well, and I would imagine that you're not putting that much attention to they're trying to decipher stamps on the top of them either.
Reading dates.
Yeah.
No, we're cranking. They're not sitting for long. They're flying through here.
And so you also not only just get bourbon barrels, talk about the other kinds of barrels. With a career as a master distiller spanning almost 50 years, as well as a Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Famer and having over 100 million people taste his products, Steve Nally is a legend of bourbon who for years made Maker's Mark with expertise and precision. His latest project is with Bardstown Bourbon Company, a state-of-the-art distillery in the heart of the bourbon capital of the world. They're known for their popular Fusion series. However, they're adding something new in 2020 with a release named The Prisoner. It starts as a 9-year-old Tennessee bourbon that is then finished in The Prisoner Wine Company's French oak barrels for 18 months. The good news is you don't have to wait till next year to try it. Steve and the team at Bardstown Bourbon Company have teamed up with Rack House Whiskey Club. Rack House Whiskey Club is a Whiskey of the Month club on a mission to uncover the best flavors and stories that craft distilleries across the U.S. have to offer. Their December box features a full-size bottle of Bardstown's Fusion series and a 200 milliliter bottle of The Prisoner. There's also some cool merch inside, and as always, with this membership, shipping is free. Get your hands on some early release Bardstown bourbon by signing up at rackhousewhiskeyclub.com. Use code PURSUIT for $25 off your first box. And so you also not only just get bourbon barrels, talk about the other kinds of barrels that you have coming in, because we're good friends with Bill and other folks from Foregate Whiskey, which I know that you've had a hand in helping them launch their products, and they got some unique barrels from you as well. So kind of talk about that process of how you
So we're always tapped into people who have different interesting barrels, sherry or port that they've done some finishing with. So we'll bring those in when we find them and find new homes for them. So like Foregate, I think we found some ex-sherry, I think they were, for that first release they did.
It was like ex-sherry, ex-rum, like it had a bunch of different things going on.
And, and we smelled that barrel. It smelled great. And then we have people like, Copper and Kings are always looking to do, not strictly bourbon, I know, but, they will try anything with a barrel, any type of barrel. They've got really interesting collaborations going on. And then people like Barrel Bourbon that do a lot of blending, always looking for interesting and unique barrels. And a lot of the beer guys like to do that too. So really, we've had all sorts of barrels come in from all different places.
Talk about some of the craziest ones you've seen.
we called it a zebra barrel for Copper and Kings, where we took new staves and used staves and alternated them around the barrel.
Interesting.
We've taken a red.
What was, do you know what like the outcome of that was, or is it still
waiting?
TBD?
Yeah. You have to be patient in this business, as you know. And then we've taken a used red wine barrel and a used white wine barrel and alternated those staves. We did with Copper and Kings again, we did a Phoenix barrel, we called it, where we took one of their old sherry barrels. We took 2 old sherry barrels. We knocked one down and cut the wood up, used that wood as fuel for the fire, and then shaved out the other one and recharred it over that sherry wood.
That's where the Phoenix name came from. Because I've seen the Phoenix barrels from them, but I had no idea like what the connotation was or where it was coming from.
That was it. Yeah. So we say to customers, anything you can think of, we'll try it. Because we're always learning, and it makes it interesting for us.
Has there ever been one that somebody came with you an idea and you're like, no, we're not going to do that?
A lot of the ideas you can tell are marketing driven, where they're looking for something different. So sinking barrels to age them underwater. I just don't think there'll be much oxygen exchange through those staves. So that one didn't do much for me. Yeah. So, you can usually tell when it's marketing driven as opposed to, distiller and tasting driven.
The pirate ship
release.
Yeah.
Them going across, in a shipping container on a ocean liner or whatever boat, they get, like the Jefferson's Ocean smells like it's salty. Do the barrels pick up any salt?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're empty. But and the Jefferson's was a cool one too. We did those barrels, and that was makes sense that the rocking and the heat, it's going to do something different.
Yeah, but these are also going in container ships, so hopefully they're isolated and sealed to a degree where it's not.
Yes,
it's not getting you're not getting too much sort of manipulation to it as it's making its trek across.
I'm joking.
Yeah. How'd that work out?
Yeah, not well.
Went right over my head.
It was not on point.
So we've talked about Scotch, we've talked about Irish whiskey. What about like Asia and Japan? Like, is there a huge market that you're selling there too?
Yeah, we send a lot of barrels into Japan. Done into Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar. They're making tons of whiskey all over Asia. And we've done
There's a lot
decent
of
volume. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if they all start drinking whiskey, it'd be really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's always funny to talk about like it kind of goes back to just global and economic trade too, how it's actually cheaper to buy barrels used here and then have them shipped all the way across the world than it is to actually have your own local cooperage that are in like some of these countries. So kind of talk about like the economics there, like, because you've had to, and your brother had to help build and grow this business to really what it is today and start your own cooperage. And the man hours, the
were you all the ones lobbying for new charred oak barrels?
No,
back in the day.
I'm very happy that rule is in place. Yeah, that's a great rule. A lot of these places don't have oak. So that's a huge obstacle right there.
Yeah.
They just don't have a supply of oak. American oak is great because it's growing everywhere right now. So there is a good supply. So that's your first hurdle. And then obviously the labor is a big deal. Trained labor and equipment. You need specialized equipment. So we used to ship a lot of used barrels knocked down. We would knock them down, lay them flat on pallets, and they'd be reassembled in Scotland or wherever.
I've heard about that happening too.
That's basically disappeared because there's so few coopers and cooperages left in Scotland. So there's no one left who can do that anymore. So that's a big obstacle as well. There just aren't skilled coopers to the same degree as there once was.
You don't think you're knocking them down. You're like, okay, 1, 2, like just numbering the staves. Like, this is how it's going in order. But no, it actually takes like somebody that
like an IKEA box.
Yeah.
And there's no direction.
And some places we did number the staves, but it's still hard.
Right.
You can never get them tight again without specialized equipment and knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even going through there and watching the process of, first actually having somebody, well, you have everything that comes from using the planing to knowing exactly the grade and exactly the angle of all these different staves need to be. So that's probably step 5 of the process.
Yeah.
You got everything between there. But then, yes, it actually comes to the person where he is pushing or looking at 8 to 10 staves at one time and knowing exactly like it's a game of Jenga or a puzzle and how to put
And you
together.
watched new barrels being done, which the staves are straight. On a used barrel, when you're doing it when they're curved, it's that much harder.
Yeah, and then they
Kinda
probably
tough,
swell or do different things.
Well,
on the
it's
trip
harder to actually physically manage them. A straight stave you can kind of make stand up. With curved one, it's trickier.
Yeah, it's like putting together like a pile of bricks that fell down.
Well, it's like when you return something out of a box and you're like, how did this damn thing fit in here? Like,
It's exactly that.
You're like, there's no way.
You'll never get it in the same way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the economies in itself, it did make sense to say, let's just break them on down. We'll ship the hoops, we'll ship the staves, and then reassemble over there. But now that you say it, it's like, yeah, once you do have basically, because we saw the process of what it actually takes to bend the wood, where you steam it, and then once it's steamed, and it's kind of like an imperfect form, then it goes into a machine where it actually does it. It bends it, and then somebody sits there and puts the first hoop on. You put the second and third hoops on, and then from there it starts going through more of the toasting and then quality control process after that too.
Yeah.
So also kind of talk about the quality control, because that's it's always a huge factor of making sure that your customers are happy.
Right.
Knowing that you're not going to be shipping out a barrel that's going to be leaking.
Yeah.
Because we've had barrels, you go to the rick house and you're like, oh shit, this one's empty.
Yes.
So,
That's a nightmare. Yes. We do an air and water pressure test. So we pump about 20 PSI of air into the barrel, and we have a few inches of water in the bottom. So if there are any leaks, we'll see them bubbling out. If they're small grain leaks or a knot or something, we might be able to do a quick repair with a wooden spile. Otherwise, if it's something more major, like a porous stave or something, we'll take that stave out, open the barrel back up and do a repair. We're pretty conscientious about that, because we have to be. Everyone's making a good barrel now, so you can't have a leaker out there.
Yeah. That scared the shit out of me. And they're like pumping air into those things, and like the bung just pops off. And it's like, I was like, what happened?
Yeah.
Somebody give me an alert next time.
Yeah. Keep on your toes back there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So to talk about some of your customers, and we got a lot of local brands we're looking at, and why they chose you over somebody else, or
I think there is an attraction to having a local cooperage. So we have a lot of local customers that like the fact that we're nearby. It's efficient, and also if there are any issues, we're right here. If they need a barrel quickly, we can do it. We can help them out. A lot of them opened up during the barrel shortage, and they couldn't get barrels anywhere, so they chose us.
Yeah. Right place, right time.
Right, exactly. But I think that local aspect is kind of an old-fashioned, where you would have a local cooperage that you worked with. So we do very, very well with Louisville distilleries. Rabbit Hole, Peerless, Angel's Envy, Michter's. All those guys are very good customers. Copper and King, as I mentioned as well. So those are all great, and that for us, getting feedback regularly is really good. Having access to the spirit as it ages, being able to taste it is great for us to make sure we're doing things right.
You mentioned age right there. Talk about, because I'm not too sure how many other products that are out there that have high age statements of that were Kelvin Cooperage barrels.
Right.
Kind of talk about some of those, because you named some of them that you did, and some of those are kind of like less than 4 years old. So is there anything that is beyond there at this point?
Peerless's Bourbon will be 4. And then we do have other customers. We have customers overseas that are doing longer extended aging and some finishing as well with our new barrels and our used barrels. So people are doing all sorts of different things. We, when craft first started taking off, we were doing a lot of 25-gallon barrels, kind of half size. People wanted quick aging. They wanted to get product on the shelves, start some cash flow running. So we were doing a lot of 25s. People seem to have graduated up to 53s now, which is kind of everyone's preferred size. There's something magical
Then the
about that.
TTB just came out with something that has to be like in a 53.
It's
sort of.
Yeah,
We're getting there.
It was proposed, and there was a big backlash. Yeah, so I think there's still comment period on that. But so we're doing less and less 25s, more and more 53s. There's something magical about that. And I think people now are kind of seeing less young whiskey on the market. I think people have the wherewithal to be patient and wait 3-4 years.
From a process point of view, is it more difficult to say, okay, we're going to do a 25-gallon barrel run versus saying, we're just going to standardize on 53 and call it a day?
Yeah,
so
it's 25s are tough. They're smaller. They're physically more demanding. You're bending over a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So the 25s are actually more expensive than the 53s, just because we can make fewer in a day.
Yeah. In that case.
But now it makes sense why Peerless is so damn good at 3 years old. It's your barrel.
Yeah. and some of them did release earlier than they thought they would because of the barrel. And I think it's that toasting plus charring.
Yeah.
On natural fires. I think it does speed things up a bit.
For sure.
If you want that option.
Uh-huh.
So it gives you a distillate or a bit more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. So now I just kind of like the wheels are kind of turning in my head right here. So I'm going to go back to like your brother and your father and starting this. I know that they had apprenticeships in doing cooperaging and stuff like that. Now, was a lot of their stuff in just repair?
Yeah, and in Scotland, it's typically repairing used barrels.
And then, so at what point? Who was the mentor or taught anybody to say, this is how we build barrels? This is how we're going to do things?
That would be my brother. Kind of figured that out on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of like
YouTube videos?
Just free YouTube, unfortunately.
WikiHow.com.
Yeah. I'm not sure how he went about that, but I think part of his training would have led him to that. They do a lot of training on different sizes of barrels and different techniques. So I think he would have just figured it out. I'm sure there was a lot of trial and error in the beginning that happily I wasn't here for. So,
let him work all the kinks out.
Yeah, and then I'll swoop in.
Yeah, let me know when you got everything smoothed out. And, you can just sit back and run a business at that point.
Right.
No, absolutely. And not only that is, I kind of want to talk about the growth of like, where do you kind of see this going? Because today, we had talked about that, it is a smaller cooperage than some of the ones out there. However, we took a tour. There's barrels just entering and leaving like constantly. It's a constant flow. And I'm sure there's going to be a point where you think you're going to be busting at the seams. Do you feel that point coming, and what could possibly be the
we've been feeling that for about 8 years now, and we just keep rolling with it. It's been an incredible boom that whiskey's been on, not only bourbon but Scotch and Irish whiskey, which is a big driver of our used barrel market. We grew up in Scotland, so you learn to be pessimistic. So we expect it to end any day now, but it just keeps going. So. Knock on wood, it keeps going.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, so you're just kind of keeping the regular churn going?
Yeah, we're always looking to grow. If you're not growing, you're losing ground. So, we're upgrading equipment all the time, looking at new markets all the time, making sure we're securing enough oak all the time. It's a constant battle. Yeah,
talk about securing oak a little bit, because I would imagine that, it's not like the new construction of a house market where that's probably a lot more demanding than what it is to get, oak for barrels. But kind of talk about how sourcing wood plays into a lot of what you all do.
It's tricky just because the production capacity has increased so much over the last few years. These new mega cooperages keep being built that are, churning out a lot of barrels and need a lot of staves. So competition for good stave logs is fierce. We work with 4 or 5 stave mills that we've worked with for years, and they're pretty loyal to us. They're typically second generation businesses like us, so there's a lot of commonalities. We work well together. So we've even during the first shortage, we were able to keep going and grow our production. So we're hoping that we're well positioned to keep doing that. But competition for those logs is tough. Prices are going up. So, and then if you have a wet winter and you can't get into the forest, that complicates matters as well.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
A wet
Yeah.
winter. And you
We
can't-
just went through 2 of them.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, and it has an effect on getting logs out the forest.
Mhm.
So you have a bit of seasonality and shortages, which you have to try and plan for.
Do prices reflect that as well when you're trying to buy on an open market? Like as in saying like, oh, sorry, we couldn't get there, so our logs or our staves are now X versus Y.
Yeah, I mean the stave guys pass price increases onto us. We have a hard time passing them on to our customers.
Right.
Typical
Yeah.
business.
And so when you talk about just prices in general, so Ryan and I, we want to go and we want to buy barrels for a whiskey brand, and this could be anybody that wants to start a new brand, and they want to come to you. Kind of where do you start off? Like how do you figure out? Is it 10 barrels? Is it 100 barrels?
Yeah.
Where do we cut you a break, or is there a baseline? It's just
No,
X
we
times Y.
we have customers that buy 1 or 2 barrels at a time, and we have customers that buy tens of thousands at a time. So we run the gamut. No order too small or too large.
Yeah, you sound like a
Get your
handyman.
checkbook out, Kenny.
Yeah.
Might be coming out here with you.
But what's an average cost of a barrel? Let's just say run of the mill.
Well, we are on a new barrel. We are not the cheapest producer out there because our volumes are smaller and our barrel's a bit different. So you're over $200 a barrel with us.
Yeah.
And you can do under 200 other places, and we know that. We don't try and compete on that lower price end because we're not making barrels for the big legacy distillers. We're making for craft guys.
Mm-hmm. And you feel like that's a good niche to kind of carve out in regards to that, because you can kind of create something that's a more of a unique spin on the typical.
Yeah, and it's more interesting for us rather than just one trip down to Bardstown selling all our production in one fell swoop. That's not very interesting.
It's like a good thing and it's a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure it keeps it interesting. The other thing, it's kind of like, man, it's a lot of phone calls to deal with.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of freight and shipping logistics, but that's fine. Keeps us busy.
Wow, it definitely keeps you busy. I'm sure. With
you gotta
that.
get a good CRM database, to keep up with everyone.
What's that?
Customer relationship.
I think that one was for your head.
Yeah.
Mine's all an Excel spreadsheet. That's how I work. Or Google Sheets. That's how I work.
We're the same.
Well,
See?
I have to deal with 2,000 people, so I gotta get an elaborate system to keep track of them all.
I'm sure Kelvin's not far behind that too. I mean, it's
that's true.
It's a growing industry, and I mean, even if we're looking at a lot of the bottles on the tables around here, you've got a lot of customers, and it's not just the big brands. It's people that are trying to carve out a new place in the market. And so you do have a lot of people that are trying new things, and I know that you're helping them do that. So kind of give us your take on the market in regards of secondary finishing, because I know that is you source a lot of these barrels, and some people look at it as a way to kind of make that differentiation into the marketplace too.
Yeah, I think it's a great move for bourbon. It's they've been doing it in Scotland and Ireland for a long time, kind of the blending tradition. And I think this finishing is a part of that, an extension of that. And I think it's a good thing for, people over here to be experimenting with. And you taste some of the stuff that's coming out, that 4-gate we mentioned before, that tastes great. Barrel bourbons, different expressions. They're all something different. I think it's a great
Their
move.
dovetail release.
Wow, that's
something unique.
So good.
Yeah. So, I think it's great. And it gives us something interesting for us to be involved in. So it's something different. So we like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got two sides of the market here. You've got the people that look at it and saying, "Oh, it's a non-distilling producer. They want to cover up. They want to mask, whatever it is that they're buying." I kind of look at it as the other side to say, as a non-distilling producer, you can't just come out with something that is just like everything else.
Yeah, and you can't get away with being untransparent now. People expect to know what's in the bottle, and so you have to tell them. I can't hide it anymore. The way people were doing, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a much more savvy market out there. There's even people now that they go to distilleries and they go and look at warehouses and they'll see the Kelvin Cooperage logo on there now, and they're going to know it. They're going to understand exactly where it comes from. So the name is getting out there a lot more too.
All these podcasts are adding to this.
Spread the gospel.
It's like every week you're on a new podcast. No, and it's definitely cool to see that and see the growth of what's been happening. Not only just to the growth of your cooperage, but just to the bourbon industry as well. And if we start looking at 10 years down the line, where do you kind of see Kelvin at that point?
That's a tough one.
You've been here for what, 18? Is that what it was?
And I don't know where the market will be. That's the tricky bit.
Yeah.
Will we still be booming? Will Scotland and Ireland still be booming? If people keep drinking, we'll be fine. But it's a tough one to predict.
It's a safe bet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the market will look like next year. But, we're gung-ho.
Mm-hmm.
But 10 years is a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
the nice thing is about, you get to, when there's the distillers, they have to forecast like even further down the line. So the nice part is you get the money like right now.
Well, somewhat.
Yeah. Because you're like, I build it today, sell it tomorrow. And
then wait for payment.
I know that part. Yeah.
Net 30s, they kill you sometimes.
It's longer than that.
It doesn't exist in this industry.
I'm sure it's not. But, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was
my pleasure. Thank you.
I mean, it was really for us and giving us a tour of the operation, the facility, because I don't think that you're open to the public for a lot of people just to come in and look at it.
We're not, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
If you are, bring your black shoes.
Make sure
flip flops.
Yeah, make sure you send the emails way beforehand, and you come with some steel toe boots or something, because it is an actual factory. It is a
we're a working for-profit cooperage.
Yes, exactly. There's no, hey, everybody, grab your hard hats and let's go ahead to station number 1 over here.
Nope, none of that.
No, but like I said, it was fantastic to be able to do that. And again, give us the idea of not only the scale, but the craftsmanship that goes on here too. It's not an automated line where you're just pumping stuff out just to pump it out, but instead there's a lot of detail that's paid attention by the people that are actually taking care of it day by day. So thank you again for doing that. If people want to know more about Kelvin Cooperage online, social media, anything like that, how do they find out more about that?
KelvinCooperage.com.
There you go. Easy enough.
And there's some videos on there too. They get an idea of what we're doing.
And if you need barrels, he already told you the price. So just take that, multiply it by whatever you need.
I'm trying to do the math in my head. How many we need?
We've got them. We'll load your car up.
I got my truck.
Don't come with a Honda Civic. That's what I can tell you.
We've put them in there before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How'd that work out?
Tight, but
get a ratchet strap.
Sure.
Very cool. Yeah, it's like I said in the beginning. I mean, we've been to other cooperages and it's so automated. This is like truly like an art. Like you can see like the individual craftsmanship in each barrel, and it's like pretty cool. Like to kind of see that all
stepping back in time.
It is. It is. It's like amazing, and now when I drink a glass, I will vividly remember all those, all the work and everything that's kind of gone into that glass. So no, I very much appreciate giving us the time and the opportunity to see everything. And I'm glad business is well and hope it keeps going well for all of us. But otherwise we won't show up again.
For sure. And so make sure you check out kelvincooperage.com and you can find out more about them. If you want to follow us, of course, Bourbon Pursuit on all the socials. And as well as if you like the show, you can help support it. Be a part of our community, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to everybody next week.